I had planned to have a new tutorial for today, but then the public test happened, so let's talk about that instead. So this rebalance is huge, but breaking it down, it's focused on a few things. A complete revamp of the quirks, new sensor system, changes to module slots, and differentiating mechs based on 4 aspects: firepower, mobility, durability, and information gathering. Let's talk about quirks first. While I haven't had a chance to go through every variant and omnipod in the game, I can safely say that everything has changed. Weapon quirks are almost non-existent except for a few mechs like the Mauler and some omnipods on the Timberwolf, but I suspect those are simply leftovers that were missed. These firepower related quirks have been replaced with ones that fall under the other 3 aspects that I listed before: mobility, durability, and information gathering. For example, let's look at 2 hunchbacks, the Gridiron and the 4SP. In the old quirk system, both of these mechs had massive boosts to their stock weapons: Gauss Rifle and Medium Pulse for the Gridiron, SRM6 and Medium Laser for the 4SP, as well as some durability quirks for side torsos and mobility quirks for increased torso twist rate. In the new system, they are planning on differentiating these chassis by having a give and take. A single mech shouldn't be great at everything. If your mech is strong in one aspect, then it needs to be weak in another. Back to our example, we can look at the post-change quirks for these mechs. The Gridiron now is the most durable hunchback with massive internal structure bonuses across the entire mech, as well as some medium-level sensor boosts. To offset this, it has negative mobility quirks with lower acceleration, deceleration, and turning rate. The 4SP goes in an entirely different direction, with smaller structure bonuses, but large increases to mobility. Again, to offset these positives, it has a negative in its information gathering. This differentiates these chassis by more than just their hardpoints. Are you looking to hold the front line with a durable brawler? You want the Gridiron. Are you looking towards more of a skirmishing flanking role? Take the 4SP. This is the goal of these new quirks, to give the variants different strengths and playstyles without shoehorning them into a specific build because of massive weapon quirks. They're also trying to do this between chassis within weight class, like where generally Ravens will have better information gathering and Jenners will have better mobility. Right now, these are typically not as clear as the Hunchback example. There are some curious numbers and choices out there for which mech received what quirk, but it's a start. Next, let's look at the new sensor system and its related quirks. Under the new system, the larger your mech, the shorter your sensor range. Lights have a range of 800 meters, mediums 600, heavies and assaults 500. When you do have an enemy in range, the process of acquiring a lock is broken into 3 steps: the mech indicator, the targeting box, and the mech info. Let's go through an example. You are piloting a Timberwolf with a sensor range of 500 meters, and an enemy mech comes into view 600 meters away. The little red Dorito won't appear over the enemy, and you won't be able to lock on as it's outside of your sensor range. Moving towards the target, you pass the 500 meter mark, and your sensor system starts to work. However, there is a target acquisition delay from when the enemy is within range to when the target marker appears above their mech. After the marker appears, you press R, and the red targeting box appears around the mech, giving you its letter designation and battle grade coordinates. It can now take up to a few seconds for the mech information to show. This is referred to as the target scan time. Typically, mechs that are more focused on combat have a longer duration for their scan time, while mechs focusing on information gathering can do it almost instantly. This scan time varies on how far away the target is, with the default values being 1 second for under 100 meters, 3 seconds for 100 to 500 meters, and 5 seconds for 500 meters plus. What people may not know is that this targeting info based on distance is not new. It is actually in the live client right now. It's just not well documented. The balance pass just adds quirks that change these default numbers. Continuing with the example, we now have a solid lock with targeting information on the enemy. However, it moves behind cover and our lock begins to decay. The time it takes to lose the lock is referred to as the target retention time. While all this is occurring, the way that mechs share their targets is also changing. It is going towards a system like radio ranges in World of Tanks. Unless your sensor ranges overlap, you will not be able to share targeting information with your allies. For example, if our Timberwolf with 500-meter range had an ally Raven with 800-meter range targeting an enemy, our Timberwolf would only be able to see that target if he was within 1,300 meters of the Raven. If the Timberwolf was further away, the sensor ranges would not overlap, and they would not be able to share data. However, if a third ally was in between them, covering the gap, and passing the signal along like a relay station, then they would be able to share the data. And finally, there have been changes to the number of modules that mechs can equip. Many mechs are now restricted to one consumable. These are typically the stronger chassis, such as the Arctic Cheetah, while some weaker chassis now have the ability to take more weapon and mech modules. Okay, that is the details of the changes, but now for my opinions on them. My overall thoughts for this is it's interesting. It's definitely a good starting point. I really like the idea of variable sensor ranges, and I love the idea of the radio ranges for sharing data. That's cool. However, I would do things a little bit coming from the other direction, where in this first pass we have sensor ranges. So an assault would be at 500 and a light would be at 800, and that's how far away they can see something. I would flip it and come at it from the other direction. I would have the light be 400, but that wouldn't be how far it could see. That's when it could be seen. So every mech, no matter what's out there, when that mech comes within 400, then they can target it. Then you can put assaults up near, say, 1,000, like 1 kilometer away, and then you can range everything else in between there. I think that was the system that I described in my what I would change for information warfare. I like that system better because you can change the detection range to help with balance. So if you have a really strong mech that can do a lot of damage, like say the Direwolf, it's a great big huge ball of guns, but you can see it from like a kilometer and 200 meters away, so like 1.2 kilometers away. That Direwolf will show up on everybody's sensors, so it's going to bring a lot of attention to the Direwolf. Right now, it's sort of more, I want to say, less visible, as if you, say, had two Direwolves at long range, they're not going to see each other. They would have to have an ally with targeting information and, say like a Raven with BAP and sensor range increases and stuff like that to be able to see the Direwolf at an extreme distance. Of course, that's not saying that those Direwolves couldn't just shoot each other, which they will. But I would just go at it from the other direction. I would have detection ranges instead of sensor ranges. The differentiating on the 4 aspects is really interesting, and it could give some things some great flavor, but I think it's lacking in a few parts. One of them is I'd like to see a theme for a chassis. So, like in the previous examples, I used the Hunchbacks. It should be that the Hunchbacks are, say, good at one thing, and just everything in there is good at that. Say they're all given some baseline structure quirks. So if you take a Hunchback, it's a more durable medium. You can have then variation within that. So you have a base level of durability, but then you increase that for 1, like the Gridiron. You make it more durable than normal. So that's your durable sensor range. You have, say, 3 points that you assign. It's getting 2 points in durability and a point in sensor range, maybe a -1 in mobility, because maybe it's 2 points that you're allowed. So then the next one over, you would have durable already, because that's the chassis boost, and then you would go somewhere else. You would apply your sort of 2 points minusing a 1 something else. So you would go, that's durable, mobile, and sensor range minus firepower, or something like that. That way you can say, If you're in a hunchback, it's a durable one. Maybe the gridiron is more durable, but all hunchbacks are durable. Then you can say something like the griffins will be mobile. All griffins are mobile. Maybe one's the most mobile, one's mobile durable, maybe one's mobile sensor range, but they're all mobile. And then you go like cicada. They're all sensors. Sensor durability, sensor mobility, but you have those combinations. But then you have sort of that flavor. That chassis is this. It could go into things like if they eventually put in the Cyclops for assaults. That would be the sensor range assault. Like, every one of those mechs would have great targeting information and stuff like that, but one would be the durable one. Yeah, you know what I mean. So I would like to see a set of quirks for a chassis, and then variation within that. And so then you could say that chassis is this, plus some variation. For the modules, I really like that some mechs are being limited to one consumable. I think that that is just a good choice. Like, you actually have to make a meaningful decision between artillery strike or a UAV. Personally, I think a UAV is more important for that information for your team than an artillery strike, but now you won't just have that free damage. You have to make the decision. Do I want to take this or do I want to take that? Or mechs that are weaker still can take both, and they can still do those kind of things. I could also like that some of the more stronger chassis, again, like the Arctic Cheetah, are losing the amount of weapon and mech modules they can take. So they can't use those modules to get around the negative quirks for the chassis. So like you could if you wanted to. Oh, my chassis has negative information gathering, so I'll put on the target info gathering and the advanced sensor range. And bam, you know, I don't have those negatives anymore. I'm cheating the system sort of thing. But they're only going to have one or two mech modules. They're not going to have the ability to then take radar derp and seismic sensor and things like that. So if they do take those really strong modules, then they are going to be have that negative of their mech. So I think it's good. Also, with some mechs that are weaker, they have a lot more module slots, so they can do more interesting things that way. And they can take care of their weaknesses, which they're a weaker chassis. They should be able to take care of their weaknesses, and that brings them up slightly and brings balance a little bit closer to each other. I do think this is a really great opportunity to change radar derp. Change it to negative 50%. And I think that'll be sort of a great sort of give and take for that target acquisition time, or whatever it was, target retention time. You can, on some mechs, with massive plus quirks for target retention time, and using the target decay module, like I was able to make 10 seconds of target decay on a Warhawk, and it was incredible. You could fire like 3 volleys of lerms before you lost the targeting information. I mean, if you're going to quirk your mech and you're going to build it very specifically so it can have that really long target retention time, then the opponent being able to take a single module that costs no additional tonnage or critical slots in their mech that totally negates your build, I think is just too powerful. I think if it was dropped to 50%, it would still be strong. For the person that fully quirked it out and was working on that as being their build, they would still have like 5 seconds of targeting information, and that is strong. Just that. But then that mech, who has the minus 50% radar derp, was going up against anything else in the game, which had negative, say, target retention time quirks. It would be almost like it was instantaneous, because there would be only those mechs would only be holding the target for a second or two, and then minus 50% would bring it down to a second or a half. It would basically be the same, just instantaneous. But then it would allow for those mechs that do those things to have their benefits. Also, some of the wording on the sensor quirks was just inconsistent and kind of bad. Target retention time and target acquisition delay were fine. They were in the values of seconds, which they should put the values on there, but they were like +2 or -3 or whatever it was. It was fairly obvious. But target scan time, medium, short, and long range, was in percentages. But people don't know that the default values are 1 second for 0 to 100, 3 seconds for 100 to 500, and 5 seconds for 500 plus. That isn't known. So when I actually had a clanmate that came on the test server and I was talking to them over TeamSpeak, and they were looking at, I am minus 200%? Like, what? Like, that just seems crazy. And that was for their short range target scanning. And I had to explain to them, like, no. That's because that's only 3 seconds. It's not a huge change. I mean, it's from 1 second to 3 seconds, but it's basically now the same as your medium range target scan time. So there wasn't much of a difference, but the big percentage value threw people off. So I really think those should be changed to second numbers, not percentages, because their base value is not the same. Some people don't know what the base values are. So you should show what the base values are somewhere in the mech stats, and you should show that it's being changed by a direct number instead of a percentage, because it screwed a couple people up. And just at least the one clanmate that I talked to, they didn't know about it. So and she knows a lot about this game, and she plays a bunch, so if she got it wrong, the vast majority of people are probably getting it wrong and are not understanding it. So definitely change that. Also, I would say in the mech stats, put those numbers, and then to the side of that, put either a green or a red number that is the modified value for the chassis. So just put the default numbers there of 1, 3, and 5, and then based on the quirks for the target scan time, put the new values, and then people could actually see, oh, okay, so it's 3 seconds, so I got a 200% increase on my short, but only a 50% increase on my medium. So it's, so instead of 1 second, it's 3 seconds for short. Instead of 3 seconds, it's 4.5 seconds for medium. Okay, I can see why that's not a big nerf, the 200%. And another thing about the radio ranges, I feel like it just isn't relevant to the current playstyle of the game. You're going to death ball up with your group, and you're all going to be within range, and you're going to easily be able to share targeting data. The only time that I can see this occurring is, say, Hellbore Springs on Community Warfare, where one group is attacking one gate, and another group is attacking another gate. Then they would be far enough apart that maybe they're not going to be able to share their data. But then again, this is a very, very small occurrence. Typically, you would never be that far apart from your team. I could even see this system being dropped down to 1 mech sensor range. Like in our example, we had 500 meters range with the Timber and 800 meter range with the Raven, combining for 1,300 meters apart that those mechs could be and still share data. I would be okay even if that was dropped down to the 800 meters of the Raven. So instead of overlapping your max sensor range, your sensors had to be able to reach your ally. Then I can actually see this occurring within a normal game. Assaults that are more than 500 meters apart would not be able to share their information. It would also give purpose for a mech, such as a Raven, that equipped a whole bunch of sensor range increasing items to sit with his team and act like a relay station for all the targeting information. Assault mechs might actually be encouraged to take radar increasing items if they couldn't share data at more than 500 meters apart. Now, I'm definitely not going to comment on any of the balancing between the chassis or between the technologies, clan versus IS. I honestly am not a professional player at this game. I'm going to leave that up to other people. But from what I can understand from their intent of this is to drop everything back to its base values, see how it goes, and then with a couple reiterations of the system, start to look for some balance between the clan and IS. So I personally am not worried about it right now. Well, those are my thoughts on the test server and the mech rebalance. Thanks for listening, and good hunting.